Welcome to the United States of America podcast. I am Niti Bali, and we are broadcasting live from the Food Church here in North Carolina. If you've missed the past episodes, please be sure to take the time to watch the first episode and watch the rest like a documentary. We are people at peace, and we have declared peace to all nations around the world. This is not a marketing or a promotional channel. We're shining a light on knowledge that is being hidden from you, and we're sharing the truth about your birthright and your inheritance. We have moderators who are assisting in the comment section. Please be kind and self-govern, and if you have questions, put them in all caps and only enter them once per show. I am joined on air with Greg Clarkson, regenerative farmer and ASN on Kansas, and now I am proud to introduce you to Justice Anna Maria, who is joining us live from Alaska today. Welcome, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Oh, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Everything is just busting open in all directions. This morning, we've just had a major download of information from the FBI regarding Barry Soetoro.
Whoa.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. Yep. All the crap is spewing out like a broken sanitation facility. It's just it's getting really interesting out here in the international jurisdiction. There's all sorts of different movements, all sorts of things going on. You may or may not be aware of the fact that when they set up all of these state and state-of-state entities, these state trusts, and state-of-states were substituted for our state-of-state organizations, and all that happened. Well, they very gratuitously set up corporations named Canada, too. And Alberta, and Mexico, and they just named all of these different corporations after actual countries. And then they began running them as franchises. And they got people, collaborators in those countries and in those provinces to take part in the operation of these corporations, foreign corporations, in these other sovereign countries. And so now there's a big flap and a lot of misunderstanding when, President Trump comes forward and says, well, why doesn't Canada just become a state? Okay. Well, the problem is they've been running the Canada Corporation as a territorial entity for 150 years, okay? And so they've got this thing called Canada, which is a franchise of the United States Corporation, right? And so this is what they're talking about. This is the version of Canada that belongs to the United States as a franchise. It's a business, okay? It's like McDonald's, okay? So we have a McDonald's in Canada, and it's a Canadian McDonald's, right? But it's actually a franchise of the McDonald's Corporation, which is a U.S. corporation, okay? Everybody beginning to get the drift of all this craziness and the difference between incorporated entities and unincorporated entities, between an actual sovereign government that is that has substance, that is physically and actually materially, substantially defined, like by borders of Alberta province, for example, as opposed to a business which is incorporated and is a legal fiction, underline the word fiction, that simply has the name so that it appears Canada, and it should appear Canada Incorporated, but they don't always add that little all important word incorporated, so you don't always know what you're talking about. You have to develop a sense of the thing from the context of the communication. And so when Mr. President Donald Trump stands up and says, well, why doesn't Canada just become a state of state, basically a state? He's talking always about Confederate states, right? Why doesn't Canada just become a state? What he should actually be saying is, why doesn't Canada Incorporated become a state of state? Okay,
Well,
if he were really communicating the situation adequately to the public, he would be talking in terms of incorporated franchises. He'd be talking in terms of business, and he'd be making it clear that, okay, we're talking about the US corporation having a franchise called Canada Incorporated, and Canada Incorporated could, in theory, become a different kind of franchise and could upgrade to become the State of Canada Incorporated franchise, okay? And people would begin to pick up on what he's actually saying instead of thinking that, oh, he's going to invade Canada or, something crazy. They think that all of a sudden he's talking about, forcing Canada to become part of our country. He's not. He's
mm-mm.
talking about a franchise corporation merely called Canada that was created in 1867.
I mean, come on now, Anna. You know that all the world is a stage, and
Yeah.
it's the theater and the drama, and this is what they want to do. And they're putting you on notice, and they're doing you a favor by letting you know that they're doing anything at all. And you're supposed to know how to put their puzzle together and think about all their convoluted chaos and confusion without, but this is the psychological manipulation. And honestly, it's like day rape in the middle of town square where they're violating you violently and they are psychologically, uh, what do they say when you go to see the therapist? The the rapist, you know? Like that's what they're doing. They're doing this to your mind because like we said before from the beginning, there is a race to control, man's consciousness. That's all this is because if we believe it, it must be true.
There's
And
that little
we're
word,
yeah,
belief.
Yep.
and we're allowing it. Last night, you talked about this. You talked about the beliefs. You talked about when are we going to stop believing the lies? When are we going to stop lying? 99% of folks right now have no idea that they're lying to themselves every day. And they're doing that. Why? Because they've been trained to be professional liars, Anna, with political correctness and politeness. This is all evil.
Yes.
There's no reason to do that. You're supposed to be honest. Hey, Anna, do you want to come hang out with me? Actually, it's not really a good time, Niti. It's not. And then Niti can just say, okay, well, I'll miss you and we'll just do it some other time. Or I can press you. Well, why, Anna? Why? Why? And now Anna might have to hurt my feelings because I won't just let her tell me the truth of just she's being kind by saying no thank you. And then if I'm going to push her this is what they did when we were small, right, Anna? When we were growing up, everybody was very honest, and it was rude for you to say why it
Yeah.
was rude, right?
Well, and let's face it, whether you're talking about an individual living man
Mm-hmm.
or you're talking about an entire country, we all need to have reasonable boundaries. And it shouldn't be any cause for concern or surprise or international incident when a country says no thanks, or you know no, we don't want to take up that topic right now. Or when, as Slovakia did, they called into question the entire authority and identity of the European Union,
Yeah.
you know, who really is the European Union and what is the nature of the states that are being represented in the EU. And this is a very important question because they're not operating as sovereign nations. They're operating as franchises of the United States Incorporated. And that's because their governments were not allowed or encouraged to reform and come forward after the Second World War. The Allies occupied all those countries and set up kind of, what did they call them? Interim governments, basically. There was a special word for it, but um, these were transitional governments between war and peace, where the old Nazi governments and Nazi affiliated governments had to be removed, and a new, at least bureaucratic administration had to be put in place to make sure that the trains ran and the water systems continued to pump water. Okay, so they put in these transitional occupational governments, right? And they just left them in place as corporations in the business of government services, right? So they brought in these corporations or created corporations within those countries to operate and provide essential government services. But they weren't actually the government of the people of that country. Okay, the people of the country didn't have anything to say about who was providing these services on an administrative occupational basis, and they never were given, full disclosure of the entire situation. What the population of, say, France after World War II experienced was that, okay, after a few hiccups, uh, the water was working in Paris, the lights were turned on, and life began to pick up. Food began to arrive in grocery stores, and bread started to be baked again. And, things got back to something like normal pretty fast because these administrative corporations came in and took over these functions and made it happen, right? And that part was great. Okay. It needed to be that way. Where it went off track, where it became wrong, was when there were no new elections that were actual public elections. Instead, what people started electing were administrators of these corporations, these governmental services corporations, and they didn't actually sponsor their own public elections and get their own national government back in the saddle and set up. They didn't know that they had to do this. They were just kind of floating along and accepting all these government services, right? And assuming that it had to be their government when in fact it wasn't. It was France Incorporated, okay? And so now you've got the EU, which is an entire group of these corporations that were, put in place as quote unquote transitional government administrative units during the occupation following the war. And they haven't been replaced by national governments. So Slovakia was exactly right in saying, who the hell's the EU and what authority do you have? If you're just a bunch of corporations acting as a cartel, what right do you have to commit your people to the WHO agenda? And, point of fact, they don't have any authority. So
So does on the Canada, is Canada Inc. located in Washington D.C. then?
I believe that their headquarters is in Ottawa,
Okay.
but the ownership of the franchise is ultimately under the parent corporation.
Yep.
Um, it would be like McDonald's International, right? Also has McDonald's National,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, um, and then underneath that, you have McDonald's for each state. You have
Yep.
McDonald's franchises in each state. And the parent corporation dictates such things as the Golden Arches, the McDonald's trademark name, the McDonald's secret sauce, all these things that, you can walk into a McDonald's anywhere on earth and they're going to have the same stuff, right?
Right. Right.
And this is exactly how they run the various franchise governmental services organizations incorporated. So they would have a national franchise, right? There'd be a national franchise for all of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And under that, there would be the provincial franchises for each one of the provinces in Canada. And they would all be providing the same governmental services in the same way according to the template established by what? The international parent company
Right.
that's sitting up here on top making determinations about the brand name and the recipes and what is the signage going to be for all these franchises, and how are they all going to account for their expenses, and who are they going to report to. All this kind of stuff is sort of stacked up. You got the global McDonald's corporation, you got the international McDonald's corporation, you got the national McDonald's franchise corporation, you got the provincial or state franchise corporation, and within that framework, you have McDonald's hamburger joints all over the frickin' world.
Yeah.
Well, they've done the same thing with governmental services, like the post office. Up here, you've got the Universal Postal Union, and I think they're out of Bern, Switzerland. Okay, so this is the global uh, parent corporation for all of the postal service organizations worldwide, and their services. They're not actual post offices.
Mm-hmm.
They are all they're all set up as services to the post office. Okay.
Okay.
So here you have the Universal Postal Union. Then you have the Regional Postal Union affiliate and franchises. Okay, so it bumps down from the global management to the international management. And so suddenly you have the entire globe, and now you have the North American regional franchise, and then you have underneath that the national franchise, and underneath that you have the state or province franchise, and then you get down to the level of the local franchises, which are all the little towns and villages that have a post office.
Yep. Okay. So on your global thing, well, in the late '80s, when we got the Russian Federation incorporated, right? That's a franchise off this top level global thing.
Right. Yeah, I'm absolutely sure that they, at that point, created, incorporated governmental entities
Yep.
and named them after Siberia Inc.
Right.
You know, Kazakhstan Inc. You know, they went through Bulgaria Inc.,
Yeah.
Croatia Inc., Bosnia Inc. They created all these franchise operations to do different functions some of them good, most of them bad.
Yeah.
And these are all for-profit corporations, just like McDonnell Douglas or GM or Raytheon, that are in the business of providing governmental services of one kind or another. There's absolutely no difference in the nature of Canada Inc. and Raytheon Inc.
Right.
They're just in different businesses. And they have the same kind of business structures with franchises attached to them. Okay, so some corporations don't have franchises, but most do.
Mm-hmm.
And they may or may not be organized in a way that we would expect. For example, BlackRock, global BlackRock, up here, the tippy top of the entire organization, has many different subsidiaries and affiliates, not all of them organized as franchises. Some of those things are organized in terms of jurisdiction. So, for example, you have BlackRock, which is all about land operations, and then you have Blackwater, which is about international sea operations, right?
Yeah.
So you don't always have that real obvious um, relationship of the franchises to the parent corporation because of jurisdictional operational differences.
Yeah.
So you might have one global corporation that has municipal corporations and British Crown corporations and national level corporations all under one giant umbrella. So it's not always as simple as having the United States with a Virginia incorporated branch. Some of these things get quite complex, but
It seems like commonality is, a central bank, a fiat currency, all. I think we could name the countries in the world on one, maybe two hands that don't have central bank, and maybe are real countries, and not corporations, and maybe there are none, but it's a very small number if there are, because of this central banking, fiat currency control mechanism. An illusion, I guess.
right, it's all just a bunch of BS. Really, it's all
Yeah,
just carnival
yeah,
level charlatanism. But the as I explained, central banks were created to control and tax commodity, um, uh, different kinds of commodity supplies.
real
Uh,
stuff, real world stuff.
right, they were
Yeah,
designed to basically rig commodities
yep,
and to generate money for the government based on tariffs, which were in turn taxes on those commodities. Now, people think, oh, well, tariffs, that's a good thing. No, tariffs are not a good thing. Tariffs are taxes, and as consumers, we ultimately pay them.
yep,
What tariffs are good for is, putting a big injection of cash back into the government. And that's why, Trump is using tariffs, is because the tariffs uh, immediately go into the pocket of the government collecting the tariff, right?
right, right.
And so then the government gets this quick, big injection of cash. And that's why they institute tariffs, is to pump up the government coffers when the government is falling on hard times. And of course, the government is falling on hard times because the Federal Reserve System is illegal and unlawful, and because the IRS is illegal and unlawful. And a lot of the things that they've been siphoning money from, like mortgages, all but about 12% of mortgages are illegal and unlawful.
Yep.
So suddenly the government, which has just, I say the government corporation, which just emerged from a Chapter 11 reorganization, is hard up for cash. So they're instituting the tariffs to fill their coffers and make up for some of the losses of income from mortgages and from internal revenue taxes and all these other things that turn out to be scams on the public. So tariff is just another name for tax. It's a different kind of tax. And what they do is they tax a commodity that's coming into your country. For example, French champagne. The bottle of French champagne might, in terms of doing the exchange conversions, it might sell for $12 in France and be $112 on the store shelf in America because of the tariff. You've got a $100 tariff applied to French champagne, which means that fewer people will be willing to pay $112 for that bottle of champagne, and it's going to rig the market in favor of California champagne, which of course is going to be much, much, much cheaper. And it's also probably going to be of comparable quality at this point. So all of a sudden, French champagne is at a great financial disadvantage as an import product. And it's because of the $100 tariff that's been placed on it. It's not that the French farmers are getting any benefit from that $100 tariff. Quite the opposite. They're suffering the loss of demand resulting from that tariff escalating the price of their product artificially in the American marketplace. All right, so suddenly that $100, where does it go? You know, it reminds me of those banks, those old mechanical banks where you'd put the nickel on the little thing, and then this hand would come up and go.
Yep.
Put the nickel. That's the government on a tariff. It's like it's amazingly fast. It's like the shark jumps out of the water, grabs the tariff, and runs away with it. And you, the consumer, don't see it. I mean, to you, all you see is that that's a bottle of French champagne and it costs $112. You don't know that there's a $100 tariff, and that Mr. Trump came up and went and gobbled that $100 faster than the eye can see, right? So, in the end, when this is going both ways, you know, we put a tariff of $100 on every bottle of French champagne, and the French put a tariff of $100 on every American battery system. Yeah, whatever it is, there's this results in what's called a trade war, where, you know, okay, you're going to put the $100 tariff on my French champagne. I'm going to put a $100 tariff on your Raytheon batteries. And so they start doing this, and they start artificially adding costs to products that then result in changes in demand and salability of products. And the ones picking up the tab for all of this are the people that need and buy those products. It all comes back down to the consumer getting bitten on the butt, all right? And all the money goes to the corporations. All the money that's being collected from these tariffs doesn't come back to the consumer. And doesn't really benefit the consumer. The consumer is the loser in this. But the government gets an immediate, controllable injection of cash. And the tendency for the government, because that's their objective, is to get the cash, right, is to put tariffs on the most popular products. So
fastest way to collect money.
Right. So whatever it is that we're importing, the things that we're importing the most of, say that the biggest import product that we have is coffee, for example. And I'm not saying that it is, but I mean, it's probably crude oil. Okay. but they won't hit hard tariffs on crude oil because they use the crude oil to create their own value-added product, you see. So what they're
Yep.
going to do is they're going to target those things that their corporations don't get a kickback from.
End products, basically.
Right.
Right.
People
So,
don't know that they're eating most of that crude oil, and they don't know that it's mostly their medication and it's all of their beauty products. So all of these petrochemical based things that are poisoning their body, they don't have any idea that that's what's happening with it, Anna. And then, who wins all the tariff upcharging? The corporatocracy, Donna. Right, Anna? It's like,
right, the government takes the tariff and the consumer pays for the tariff. And
Well,
the producers pay for the tariff in the terms of lost sales.
it's interesting because if you look at the long term of this,
there it
the
is.
impact.
Money laundering. Sorry.
There you
Greg.
go. The impact is gonna squash demand. Ultimately, right? And their fictitious currency engine runs on velocity of, I'll say money. It's not money, but you know what I mean. Velocity of currency and M2 money supply. So the supply of their currency out in the market and the speed that it changes hands is how their system works. So the tariff ultimately, in the short term, it works for them, but in the long term, if you start to squash demand, you're going to slow that velocity very quickly.
Right.
So they can't play this game too long, or they're going to be hurting on the other side, basically.
Exactly. That's why modern governments use tariffs as short-term injections of cash.
Yep.
This is like an emergency loan to self.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're doing it on the backs of the producers and the consumers.
Right.
Okay. So the farmer in France who produced the grapes and produced the wine and bottled it up and took it to market is losing sales.
Yep.
Right. Right.
And
This is
the
all an energy exchange, but people aren't really getting this concept. When you're moving money around, it's blood money. This is all energy. It's an exchange of energy. That's all. Right.
Yeah.
It's our sweat equity, friends. That's why we're banks. That's what this is all about. I don't think
that French farmer too it's even worse than that champagne. If it's a red wine, it'd be different because red wine gets better with age. But that champagne, he planned on this year's sales 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. I don't even know what it's not long. Yeah. So and so now he's going to have a glutton of product. And then he's going to naturally pull back because he's got to lay off workers and this and that and the other. So in 2 years from now, whatever that lead time is, when they say, "Oh, the tariffs, let's do away with the tariffs," and all of a sudden the demand pops back, guess what? He didn't have any, or he didn't have enough at that time.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It creates all sorts of supply imbalances.
Yeah.
And just using the example of the French farmer who's producing this bottle of champagne, he has to invest in his grapes. He has to invest in his fertilizer for the grapes. He has to invest in all the hand labor involved in trimming the vines and then going out and harvesting the grapes and then hauling the grapes to the winery and then paying for the casks and everything, to create the product, finally gets the product, bottles it, labels it, brings it to market. Here's this beautiful little bottle of French champagne, right? $12 on the store shelf in France. Then Donald Trump says, "Well, we don't want people getting drunk and happy. And besides, I can charge more." And so he goes, well, we're going to put $100 tariff on that bottle of champagne coming into this country because we don't want to encourage sin, do we? Okay, so that $100 tariff gets snatched by his corporation. It's there and it's gone. You don't even see it. Okay. and then it winds up on your shelf as a $112 bottle of French champagne, and you're just going along thinking that that's what it costs.
Yeah.
You don't see the tariff, okay? But it's there. And when you have to make a decision about buying that bottle of wine, you're just going to say, well, it's $112. Would I rather spend $112 on a bottle of French champagne, or would I rather buy a American bottle of champagne for 18?
You can have 5 times more fun with the American champagne.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so suddenly the American champagne becomes much more affordable. It's probably comparable in quality. Why would you ever buy a bottle of French champagne? It's going to sit there on the shelf and get dusty, right?
Right.
And back home in France, the farmer is sitting there, and suddenly demand for his champagne has dried up. Literally, it's overnight. Boom! Oh, sorry, we can't sell your product. We can only sell maybe, one bottle out of 100 now.
Yeah.
And so demand for his product goes right off the cliff, and the poor guy is left standing there going,
Yeah.
what am I going to do? I can't afford to invest in bringing forward a new crop next year if I can't sell it. If I don't have a market for it, I'm just increasing my losses by doing so. So he cuts back. And as Greg pointed out, it doesn't take long before he's gone into a different business entirely. He's no longer using his grapes to make champagne. He's selling them for table grapes in Hungary. Okay. So this is the kind of thing that happens with tariffs. They create an artificial environment in which the producers are harmed and the consumers pay for it.
Well,
So
and I think it hurts the small producers. It's a classic case of the corporations don't get hurt. Ultimately, they don't get hurt. It's that small farmer in this case, like we're talking about, or medium-sized farmer, but not a corporation.
yeah,
It's those are the ones that get hit the worst out of all this. The corporations will be, they're publicly traded. They'll write it off. Okay, the tariffs hit. We had a bad quarter. We lost $1 billion. Big deal, right? That's it. You should do that all the time. Well, Joe, grape farmer, he doesn't have that luxury. He's got real accounting, right?
right.
Money,
Well,
money out.
Right.
that's why what we want is to encourage everyone who is in business for themselves. I mean, the American tradition is to create your own enterprises. It is to be the business owner. I mean, that's one of the big deals here on Raleigh, North Carolina, is this entire place was, built on, personal and individual businesses and small business. And when you go around America, then most people are, most of these towns are trying to promote, local, everybody. This is like a big thing. But then they trick all the men, all the living men to incorporate. So, guys, when we're talking about all of this, what we're trying to explain, this is the thing that Anna said to me that I never thought about, was the only reason to incorporate is for bankruptcy protection. Well, I didn't start a business for bankruptcy protection.
Right.
And most of you probably didn't. And
let's this really puts it in perspective. So let's go back just a step and look at two things. How things got started. Okay, this is really important information for people to understand. Central banks got started because Germans were spending a lot of money importing coffee. Okay, and the king of Prussia looked at all of the German silver that was going to South America in exchange for coffee, and he said, I don't think coffee is good for people to drink. I think it might make shoe polish, but no, it shouldn't be something that people are spending all this money on to import. I don't like coffee. On top of that, I need money. They need to be spending their money here. They need to be giving a bigger proportion to the government in support of the government. So the central bank was born. And what did the central bank do? Oh, it was responsible for imposing tariffs on coffee, giving that money to the government, i.e., the king, and reducing the demand for coffee as a commodity in Prussia. That is what a central bank was created to do, is to rig commodities. And it doesn't take very long before the commodity rigging extends to the ultimate commodity, money.
Yep.
Okay, so the central bank controls not only orange juice and French champagne and rubber tires, they also control the money. And money is a commodity. This is what people don't think of. And so the central banks are jerking around and manipulating and rigging the supply of money, just like they dink around and control the amount of French champagne. Okay? So that is the history of the central banks, and that is what a central bank does. And then they turn around, and then on top of that, they're given taxing authority. The quote unquote government gives them the ability to tax you, even when the government itself doesn't have the ability to tax you in certain respects. Okay? So what you are left with is this insidious, corrupt, controlling business, the central bank, which is in the business of commodity control and corruption.
Yeah.
They should not exist. They should be totally outlawed. Okay, and if you want a free market, you're never going to have a free market in any commodity, including money, until you get rid of the central banks.
That's
And
right.
I do mean get rid of them. The problem with central banks is that governments find them very handy. Central banks, they can offload their taxation responsibilities on the central banks, let the banks tax the people, and then take the cream and not have any of the responsibility and administration of imposing taxes. Okay, so that's a nice little thing to check off their responsibility list, isn't it? And then they don't have to worry about managing a trade policy, because the banks are going to take care of all of that using their systems of commodity rigging. They're going to dictate the price of orange juice and whether the orange juice farmers have a good year or not. Okay, they're going to do all of that as part of their normal business, and the government doesn't have to think about it. They just reap the profit.
Yep.
As long as the central bank is reaping profit for the government doesn't give a rat's patoot about the people.
Yep.
You mean the corporatocracy? That's what we have to keep remembering, you guys. And yes, they're posing as our government right now.
Well, they want to give you just enough, as the farmer or any of this, what you're describing here. They want to give you just enough to feel like yeah, exactly. And hope for next year. Maybe next year will be better. And maybe next season will be better.
And all the while, the farmer doesn't even know that this rigging is going on.
Nope.
So this right here, this moment right here, Anna, is a good example of the corporate psychological manipulation that we even still experience on assemblies, because this is the moment where it's that, what do you call it when you are held in bondage, and your captor is teasing you, they're playing games with you, and they're trying to trick you into, getting to the moment where you are just basically worshiping them, right? You are fearing them. This is the evil, you guys. This is the thing that they do. That is the evil violation of you as the creator. They're violating you as the creator and making you believe that they're giving you the license, the permission to create whatever, your idea is. But I mean, people are bringing this onto all the assemblies too, Anna, because they're confusing something. This is a really big problem. They believe that leadership and authority is the same thing, and it's not. Look, Anna, you're leading us right out of the darkness into the light. You are giving us this information, and it's not like you're doing it by yourself. You're giving credit to all the millions of people that have also brought this before you. I mean, good grief, our forefathers didn't come here, you guys, to discover some new land. They came here to free men. This is the mission, isn't it, Anna? The mission is to free all living men from enslavement, period. That is the mission. Okay. And what happens is that, well, we don't have a top down, so we don't have a boss, we don't have a leader, no one's in charge, there isn't a power position. But then, excuse me, there is a responsibility of anyone who's come before. If they've walked through that door that you left cracked open and they came in before that person before, then they have more information than the ones just coming in, right? And that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be helping everyone and saying, no, look, this is what we've learned. Look at it's this, and then providing the guidance. That responsibility, that leadership is not authority. We're not bossing each other around here, guys. We're not the bosses of each other. But we have to say, no, that's not how we do it. This is how we do it. I know you're used to that because, we were all abused. We've all been mistreated. And so, no, it's not that way. It's this way, right? And this is a problem. And you're hitting the nail on the head, when you're saying, Greg, like, they just get, so everyone is just used to getting enough or getting a whatever. It's very easy for anyone to just abuse someone else on the assemblies by making them believe that they're better than them or they have some power over them or whatever, and shrink someone because everyone's been diminished for so long.
Right.
And we have to be really, really careful and really care so much and remember the mission. The mission is just to save all the living men. So look, this is a great question too. So we have Dorothea here. Okay, Anna, she is in Africa. She's and she's like, how do you get your state involved? And so we have the South African Assembly, but she's saying, because I've been talking to her in the background over here, Anna, and she's wanting to know, how do they get recognized? She wants to know, how do they get, tied up with, what do they do to be recognized by the bank? Like, what is the process if she wants to bring back her people? She's saying, they want Africa to be able to, stand up on their own. She's saying they're just one part of the 54 states. So what would you like to share with her?
Now, I don't know a lot about South Africa. I know that South Africa was the proving ground for the corporatocracy when Cecil Rhodes Corporation, called the British South Africa Company, was given a contract to provide the government for South Africa back in the 1890s. And they went in and provided governmental services and became the de facto government of South Africa. I don't know how many states there are. Okay, you have 9 provinces. Okay, the provinces would be the equivalent in a commonwealth system of our states. Okay. The country as a whole, that's defined by its national borders, South Africa, has the right and ability to establish a national bank. And people from anywhere in the country, from any of the provinces, can organize this national bank. Okay, so long as everybody in the country has access to the services of that bank, it can be a national bank. So you can actually apply for a bank treaty and a bank charter from Global. And these are simple documents, they're self explanatory. You have to find 7 people that can fill 7 different offices that are required in the bank. And you have to come up with your own names for your banks and an address for your banks. And at that point, you can establish a sovereign treasury account for your national bank. All right. And that means that all the money that is collected that's owed to the people of South Africa goes into your sovereign treasury account with the global bank. Okay, so that is a beginning point that every country can do for its own benefit and for the benefit of its people. All right. It can have an assembly both at the provincial level and at the national, the entire country can have its assembly. Right. So all of that is entirely doable. And you have the right to occupy and to populate your land and soil. Now, the Brits aren't going to tell you that because it's to their advantage to continue to act as your government and continue to impose their territorial rule on you. But the truth of the matter is that you have every right in the world to operate your own government and to take over control of your own land and soil.
Anna, do they have the same kind of provenance, or what can you say about their land and how it was granted? And I'm curious also for India after this. But anyway.
Well, India has been a country for thousands of years, and nobody has any ability to say otherwise. South Africa has been recognized as a country for thousands of years too, under other names. But what you're looking at is what kind of a structure is your custom for the land and soil. Who traditionally owns the land and soil in your country? And we, for example, have our states of the union that are in charge of the land. We have our counties that are in charge of the soil. And virtually all countries have got some sort of similar custom or tradition regarding their land and soil that they need to refer to. Who are the responsible people and institutions that you have customarily who own and decide issues of land and soil? Now, what you have in Africa is an incipient African Union, is what it's called. And it was started by Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi looked around and said, well, they have the United States. Why can't we have the African Union? And, we can't get enough of their funky money, their Federal Reserve notes, but we have plenty of gold and silver in Africa. Why don't we just create a African gold coin and use that within all of the countries of the African Union, and then go to our customers and say, well, we're going to be trading in gold, and if you want to trade with us, you need to trade in gold too. Okay, well, this would flip the whole story on its head, because suddenly Africa would be rich. They'd have all this gold, and they could trade in gold, and they wouldn't need all these Federal Reserve dollars, right? And so it would have completely flipped the dynamics of the situation in favor of Africa and the countries of Africa, and given them a basis for trade that they could then build into stable local economies. In fact, Gaddafi had done that in Libya.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know this in this country, but Muammar Gaddafi was a hero in Libya because he had brought about great beneficial social changes and economic changes for average people in Libya. They were able to get universal education through college level. They all had homes. They all had free utilities. They had universal care for the elderly. They had stipends for the elderly. They had all of these things that were um, based on the government giving back to the people in Libya. And the great fear was that the African Union idea would take root and the Africans would start operating on gold, on a gold standard. And then the perpetrators of this other system wouldn't be able to trade mere paper, this very special paper, for goods and services. So that's why Muammar Gaddafi had to die, and that's why Libya had to be overrun, and that's why Gaddafi had to be vilified and demonized and slandered in death and in life, was because he was trying to do something good for Africa and Africans, and trying to find a new basis and a new way forward for the countries in Africa to trade with commodities that they controlled and that they had in abundance. Okay.
I always said, if you normalize based on natural resources, which is what that is, where would England be?
England would have exactly zip. It would have
They would
wool.
be they'd be a little speck, is all they would be, and that's why they've done there. The Germans or the Dutch influence, whatever, but they've had to make it this way because they know they have nothing.
Yeah, they're just a rock in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, that nobody would care about.
No, we would all go our ways, and we'd buy sweaters from them.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Africa is making a lot of big moves. I mean, it looks like, they're trying to form the ISDA, and this Ibrahim Traore, I don't know if I'm saying his name properly, Anna. Do you know? Yeah. Do you know what's going on? I mean, is he actually doing well? Is he actually doing good? I mean, it seems like it, but it's very hard to know the truth.
Well, yes, he is doing well. And he's picking up where Gaddafi left off, and doing so from a position of armed strength, which is, and the world is watching. I mean, they got away with what they did to Gaddafi and to Libya because the world wasn't watching, and now the world is watching. And I want to bring attention to you, to your attention, that for many, many, many centuries, Africa was not getting its fair share of the natural flow of energy on the Earth's entire grid.
Right.
Because they had actually placed blockages.
Oh, you mean inside the Earth, like the actual energy?
I'm talking about the ley lines.
Oh.
They had dammed the ley lines so that they bypassed around Africa. And we removed the Bardsey Island seal.
Wow.
So suddenly, boom, all that energy that was not going to Africa started flowing the way it's intended around the globe. Right. And that's what's been, that is one of the things that has given Africa back its energy and push, is that it's no longer being subverted. The ley lines are flowing directly into Africa as they were meant to. And then we moved the Great Palatine Seal, and that shoved more energy toward Africa that should have been going to Africa instead of to Rome. Okay?
Right.
So all of this it's all returning to the natural order of things. It's all returning to the way the earth was set up originally. not
Nice.
how it's been manipulated to be. And what's going to happen is that Africa, which is huge, Africa is unimaginably bigger than
That
we
they, yeah,
than we
bigger than
think.
they want us to know.
Yeah, I mean, they put Africa on the globe, and it looks like it's about the same size as South America.
Right.
No, no, Africa is about 3 times the size of South America. So
Mhm.
if you were to actually put it in proportion on a globe, you would have all of these European countries all clumped up in this little bitty area, and then you'd have Africa.
Mhm.
Okay, so Africa is about to come into its own, and it's about to be getting actual viable commodity exchange instead of paper. Okay, and they will have control because they will have their own resources. They will have their own gold. They will have their own diamonds. They'll have their own silver.
They have everything.
Their
That
own
they've had anyway. That
earth.
they've all had anyway. They went and robbed them first, and then they started heading around the rest of the places around the globe. So,
Yeah.
Dorothea, we're praying for all of you guys to be remain strong. They've
Yes.
really.
It reminds me of the sign at the Chilkoot Charlie's bar in Anchorage. We steal from the other guy and pass the savings on to you.
Mhm.
You know. Um,
Wow.
but before we totally lose the thread here, Niti,
Yes.
going back to the advantage of corporation and where the quote unquote advantage started. In the
Mhm.
19th century, um, we had the invention of what? Nitroglycerin, which was,
Mm.
this was the biggest explosive value, the biggest change since gunpowder. Unfortunately, pardon me. Unfortunately, um, nitroglycerin is unstable and it has a tendency to blow up and blow up the factory where it's being manufactured, and it blows up workers and buildings and surrounding neighborhoods, and it was very dangerous to manufacture.
A high liability product, huh?
It was
I mean, it's reminiscent of when they first came up with gunpowder for the first time.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that changed everything.
Right, and nitroglycerin became the next gunpowder because it was the next incendiary explosive that packed a big punch in a small package. And so nitroglycerin was a big invention and a big money maker for all of the defense contractors and guys that were making bigger and better bombs. And from nitroglycerin, you developed dynamite, and all dynamite is nitroglycerin soaked in diatomaceous earth and packed into a cylinder, a package. And the diatomaceous earth is used to stabilize nitroglycerin, so it's not so explosive that it explodes just from being jiggled in the back of a wagon. Okay, so that was the big thing, was the development of nitroglycerin and stabilized dynamite. Okay, so dynamite was under big demand for all these huge construction things that were going on in the 19th century, for blasting tunnels for railroads, for making holes in the ground to promote reservoirs for dams, all this stuff. It all needed this explosive power. And so the guy who invented all this, who discovered nitroglycerin, was Nobel, the guy who funded with his wealth from all this destruction, right? He funded the Nobel Peace Prize because he felt guilty about giving the world something that was going to destroy so much, So anyway, that's where the Nobel Peace Prize came from, was from the inventor of nitroglycerin. And
he rewrote his obituary, basically. He didn't want people reading the obituary saying
Yeah,
that he was the master of destruction.
exactly. Exactly. So, anyway, all this then gave rise to industries like um, dynamite producers, and also then it began to affect during the Civil War, began to affect arms manufacturers like Colt and Winchester and Remington, because people tried to hold them accountable for guns that misfired, guns that exploded, even the misuse of guns for illegal purposes, like the genocide of the Indians. All these court suits and things were coming up. And all of a sudden, nobody would invest in these industries. And yet the government wanted the guns, right? The government wanted the dynamite. And so, in order to keep these industries functioning and producing these dangerous products, the government extended them the benefit of public bankruptcy. And what public bankruptcy allowed was that you could invest in these very dangerous industries and only risk what you had in that investment. If the company got sued, uh, they couldn't come after anything else of yours. They could come after that factory, for example, but they couldn't go after your house. They couldn't take your horse and wagon. They couldn't take your other investments in other safer things. Okay, so this was a move, kind of an insurance for the investors in these dangerous products, in producing these dangerous products. And they were given the privilege of public bankruptcy, meaning that the public would bear the cost of their bankruptcy and they would be held harmless otherwise. Okay, so say that you have a dynamite factory and you're a shareholder in the corporation that owns the dynamite factory, right? Okay, the dynamite factory blows up and kills 54 people and levels the city block all around it. Okay, so you've got millions of dollars of property damage, you've got lives lost, and you've lost the entire factory facility. You can go bankrupt. And once you're bankrupt, the families of the people who were killed can't sue you. And the other property owners whose property was flattened can't sue you. And the court, in trying to settle all of this, has to be content with whatever assets are left of the now flattened factory facility, which probably won't be a whole lot. Maybe their bank accounts or some tax credits or something like that. But they won't be able to come back on you as a shareholder. You will be covered by the corporate veil, and so you'll not be held liable for the factory blowing up or the death of the 54 people or the loss of all the other property around the facility. That will be written off against the public, against you and me. We're the ones that are going to pick up the losses. All right. And so they extended this benefit of public bankruptcy to these dangerous product producers. Okay. That's how it started. And we saw a reprise of this just recently with the, guess what? Vaccines. In 1986, the vaccine producers, the pharmaceutical companies, said, hey, we're going to stop producing vaccines because we're getting too much blowback. Too many people are taking us to court for our products causing harm or our products not being effective, or both. So we're going to stop producing vaccines. And Congress said, oh, no, we can't have that. Somebody has to keep producing vaccines. And so they gave these pharmaceutical companies not only bankruptcy protection, but at public expense, but they also gave them basically a carte blanche to continue to produce vaccines with absolutely no liability for their product. Okay? Now, what happens? In point, nobody's saying this, but what happens is that when Congress removed that liability, that natural product liability from the manufacturers, they accepted that liability themselves. And then they interpreted themselves as being the representatives of the public and passed all of that on, presumably, to the public. So the victims became the underwriters, right? But there is that other option of the other way of looking at that, and that is that the members of Congress became liable for their acts.
Mm-hmm.
Because when they waived the liability of the pharmaceutical companies, they accepted the liability as the members of the United States Incorporated.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You see, they're not really Congress members.
Yep.
Right.
They're operating as the board of directors of a corporation, like any other corporation that just happens to be in the business of providing governmental services. So guess what? It turns out that they don't have any state immunity.
Yep.
Bless you, bless you, bless you.
And since they don't have any state immunity, that means that their corporation and they individually are 100% commercially and personally liable.
Mhm.
Liable. Yep.
And only, bless you, only because you were able to know the ancient law and catch that. But outside of that, no one would have ever realized that. That was the big deal, too.
Well, what people need to do is they need to be bringing suit against Congress and corporate.
Bless you. Oh, my goodness. Okay, we know that we've gone over the hour. We get it.
Oh, yeah, we are.
We're going way over the hour. But listen, there's this one question. I don't know if this is going to be quick, and we'll continue it next week if we need to. But Danny's been trying to ask you this question for a minute.
I wondered about this. Is a question I've had, so this is a good question.
Look, Danny, we've been, bless you, Anna. We've been trying to ask this question. It's not like we're not trying to ask Danny's question.
The reason why I wanted to ask about this, I'll just add some, and maybe Danny's the same way, but every year my family puts out flags for Memorial Day.
Mm-hmm.
And, the grave markers have the various wars and whatnot. And I always go by the GAR and wonder, well, what really is that? So, and we're coming up on Memorial Day, aren't we?
That's why it's appropriate. Yeah.
Yeah, this is great.
One way to look at the Grand Army of the Republic is as a union of soldiers and sailors from all walks, all sides of the Civil War. What happened after the Civil War is that, as usual, the soldiers and sailors got screwed silly. They were left without any of the benefits they were promised. They were left holding the expense, but no profit. And many of them were wounded or disabled or in some other way damaged or maimed, right? Civil War was incredibly brutal. And so there was a need for them to come together and to remember the dead and to, try to comfort each other and help each other to get through the aftermath, emotionally, physically, economically, in all ways. And so the GAR was born as a veterans organization, sort of like Veterans of Foreign Wars or American Legion. But the thing about the GAR is that they were bringing together veterans from the North and South of the Civil War. Okay. And so they did. They brought together veterans from both the North and the South, and they began doing good works for veterans and their families, and they began kind of picking up the pieces and organizing things like granges and seed banks, and I guess you could call them sharecropper services in the South. And they began, hosting public meetings and events like barbecues and going around and decorating the graves on Memorial Day. They would have both the Union flag and the Confederate flag, and they would go and put the flags on the various graves. So they have a large, spectrum of services and activities that they developed after the Civil War. Now, we see this with Daughters of the Revolution and Sons of the Revolution. That again is the progeny of the soldiers and sailors that fought the Revolution. Okay, and so they're bringing together as a progeny, right? The GAR is bringing together the soldiers that fought in the Civil War. Now, the importance of the GAR is that they stood at that point where the military became the mercenary.
Yeah.
And there were both involved in the early days of the Civil War.
Yeah.
That conversion did not happen instantly because of Abraham Lincoln. Okay, so this is where the linchpin comes. And the members of the GAR have the record of it.
Wow.
Members of the Grand Army of the Republic have both sides. And they have all the records. So that is a crucial organization of great importance historically. And it continues to be important today for that reason. Because you start out as an honorable military and you get through the lawfare charlatanism and the fraud, and you come out the other end of it as mercenaries who have been left unpaid by commercial corporations who owe you money and benefits that they just kind of skip town on.
I'm kind of curious. You'd mentioned Civil War records in various states, and one of them was on Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious now. It probably most likely is in Leavenworth, which is right up on the border with Missouri. And you've talked about this too. There was very, very vicious border wars between Kansas and Missouri. But there's a museum up there, and I'm kind of curious now. I might have to make a trip up there. I suspect there may be some GAR records up there that may be interesting to see.
To this day, Greg, when I told the people in Missouri that they needed to get their act together or there was a danger of them becoming Greater Kansas, they got active.
Well, yeah, the rivalry hasn't necessarily died.
I could have, Missouri is surrounded by 10 different states. It's one of those states that has the most borders with most other states. I think it may be number one.
Yeah,
okay?
That's true. Yeah.
But of all of the motivating factors, they weren't worried about anybody else. They were just worried about becoming Greater Kansas. I love that. But
we all have to have our motivations, right?
whatever it takes. I'm one of those people that's a motivational powerhouse. I just use whatever comes to hand, poke and prod.
I was gonna say you had a thorn and you poked it in the right spot.
I love them dearly, but Missouri's had a lot of problems getting organized and finding enough people that had the right skill sets to make it all work. And I hope and pray to God that they've now conquered that and are well on their way.
Absolutely.
But we we've got a lot of history in this country, and the Civil War history is crucial to it because that's where the great fraud in this country really, truly began in earnest. There were plenty of other fraudulent things that took place, but where the pedal really hit the metal, and the British Crown and the central banks and the Europeans came over here and really began their fraud activities, and their illegal occupation began with the Civil War. And that's also where they began using our honorable soldiers and sailors as cheap mercenaries and got away with it. So there are still very significant I can't even find a proper word to describe this. When a soldier or sailor goes to war, in a real war, they're going for their country.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to protect their family, their land, okay? When a mercenary goes to war, he's protecting the interests of a corporation, of a company.
Yeah.
Of a commercial business, right? That's why they call them commercial mercenaries, right?
Mm.
So in this country, we've had a situation since 1860 where our honorable soldiers and sailors involved in a lawful national military were converted without their knowledge or consent into a mercenary force, and never realized that they were mercenaries.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
so,
that's an unbelievable, it's one thing, all the stuff that's been done to all of us, but that's an unbelievable thing to do to people, that they're willing to risk their life for their country and their fellow man, and to have that thrown over them, and hidden from them. It's just an unbelievable act.
it's an outrage of unbelievable proportions.
It
It's
is.
crime.
Yep.
But there's an additional crime here that I need to get to, and that is having been converted to mercenaries, working for commercial corporations, and attacking other people, and for the material commercial benefit of these corporations. These soldiers and sailors were promised certain things. And I won't call them benefits, because benefits implies that it was something free that was given to them. But it was instead supposed to be part of their pay. Okay? And in the case of the Civil War veterans, it was supposed to be land. They were supposed to be given land. And some of them were, but many of them were not. Most of them didn't even know that they could claim their land portions. And the other thing that they were supposed to be given was a portion of gold. They were supposed to get like a stipend, a pension in gold. And of course, that never happened. So there were certain things that they were supposed to get as part of their payment, and instead the corporation that was supposed to be paying them these things and supposed to be providing these returns, right, went bankrupt and left them standing there with no recourse to claim against the successor organization, and so they basically cheated them out of their mercenary pay. And that's part of what the GAR was organized to try to deal with. They've done this consistently with every single mercenary conflict ever since. They did it with the Civil War. They did it with World War I. They did it with World War II. In World War II, the returning veterans were supposed to get a stock portfolio the government corporation bought up controlling interest in the Fortune 500 companies, and the soldiers and sailors were supposed to get individual stock portfolios in these companies because the investment was being made possible uh, by them, and their sacrifices. And they were cheated out of this by the corporation, first of all, failing to recognize that they ever came home again.
Mm-hmm.
The corporation just pretended that, lacking direct communication from the individual telling them that they were returning to the State of the Union that they hailed from, that they were choosing instead to voluntarily remain in the federal district and federal enclave. And so they never came home.
They never came home. Wow.
Right. And so their portfolios were kept by the buggers and managed, quote unquote, for them. And over time, everybody just forgot that they were ever supposed to receive these portfolios of Fortune 500 company stock. And so the rats took the controlling interest in all of these corporations and used that as leverage on those corporations to make the corporations do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
And the soldiers never got their recompense. And we discovered this as part of our research. And of course, it's very offensive that this has been done. But they've had no protection or support other than their own organizations like, VFW and
American Legion.
Those sorts of organizations. They haven't had a government that was in session to grab the corporations by the balls and say, pay up, bastards.
Right.
And that's what needs to happen also, is that these corporations that have been benefiting themselves and lording it over the people need to pay their debts. And it doesn't matter that they went bankrupt, because guess what? The principals are still on the hook for it, which means Britain is still on the hook for it.
I find this interesting with you talking about this. July 2nd, 1862 is when they did the act to give the land grant, the college grants, or the colleges for benefit of agriculture and mechanical arts is actually what the act says. Now that you say this, that is almost a slap in the face, because that was land they were giving away in 1862 to the colleges instead of the Civil War veterans.
And in 1863, they went bankrupt.
Right.
And they were using those land grants to the colleges to leverage in and gain control and favor with the college administrations so as to limit the curriculum.
They bought the colleges with land grants.
Right.
And then they use those to launder money because those are the nonprofits, and that's what they do. And then we can go into how they block a bunch of land for the colleges, and then how they did the state parks and, all the national parks and all this other crap. We could go on and on and on and on and on about how they did that.
And what's worse is I never thought about the fact that all of that happening, but the fact that they took this land from the Civil War veterans to be, I never really put
which
that
wasn't
together.
even a war, which was the mercenary conflict. And then it was all during the same time of the Pony Express. And so, come on, while the guy's riding around trying to give the word, and if he wants to murder somebody on the way, who's going to stop him? And you're playing a game of telephone, and who's going to go back and say that it was wrong? And then also Right? Like we could go on and on. And if mom and dad have a fight, Anna, then how do the children ever know what actually happened in the fight, right?
Well, unfortunately, it's too late, obviously, for those
Yep.
people, right? But like you've always said, and talking about the World War II, my grandfather's is a World War II veteran. He's passed away, like probably 98% of them now. I don't know. There's not many left. So there's nothing that we can do for him. But you can help the families. You can help, because all of those guys went over there. He went there because he wanted to save his country, right? He was doing it out of honor, patriotism, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
He wasn't going over there to get money. They all went over there out of patriotism and honor, and then they got pooped on when they came home.
Right. Well, and you see, once the news gets out to the military that they're not the military anymore, and once it gets out to the rank and file that they've been used as indentured servants and as mercenaries, cheap mercenaries for hire by commercial corporations, and then they've been cheated by those same commercial corporations, and that these commercial corporations have ritualistically sought bankruptcy protection after every single war, then what we really need to do is remove the corporate veil from those corporations and go straight back to the principles, which is basically the Pope and the British monarch and Great Britain Company and the UK British Crown Corporation, and strip them bare.
Yep.
The British Crown needs to be liquidated for its crimes.
Yep.
And those crimes are many, and they stretch back more than 150 years. So the British Crown needs to go.
Yep.
And together with the British Crown, the Great Britain Company needs to go. Both of these entities, one in international jurisdiction and one in global jurisdiction, have been the cause of more misery and more destruction and more gigantic wars and more theft and more murder than any other entities on earth.
Yeah.
And so they all need to be liquidated, and the purloined assets need to be returned to the people that they belong to. And you're right, Greg. Number one, for many of those who were the initial victims, there is no recompense on this earth because they're dead and gone. We can't do anything for them anymore. But we can sure as hell benefit their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Well, that's why they fought. Actually, that's why they fought. They fought for their children and their grandchildren. That's what we do, right?
That's what we're doing, yeah.
That's what we're doing. We're doing things so that my grandchildren can have a better future. That's why I do what I do. So,
well, there's another aspect to that I have had to deal with as a fiduciary. And it's one of the most outrageous, bad, painful parts of my job. And that is that a fiduciary, you think of a fiduciary, you're supposed to be making sure that the right people get the right money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it should be simple. It should be kind of, okay, well, this goes in this box and that goes in that box. And it should be simple, but it's not. And I'll tell you the thing that is the most cloying about it all is that there are so many debts that can never be repaid. There are so many kinds of debts that do not reduce to money.
Right.
I mean, how can you make up for lives that have been truncated, for opportunities that were stolen, for educations that were never accessible, for health that was destroyed for lack of basic things like food during a child's development?
Right.
These are horrifying losses that cannot be made up in money.
That's right.
No.
There just is no
Nope.
there's no exchange rate for that.
I think that, I can really appreciate that, what you're saying, the magnitude of that. And, it's just all you can do is to do whatever it takes to make sure it doesn't happen. It doesn't continue to happen.
Right.
That's really all we can do at this point, is to put an end to it and
So we
make
have
sure.
to stand up. We have to be focused on the mission, friends. We can't be fighting about stupid crap. Like, we
No.
need to be focused on the mission, which is just to save every living man. And most people around the world are just not well. They can't see the forest for the trees, friends, because of the corporate veil. It is so heavy on their heads, and it is keeping their heads down, and they can't see. So no matter what, we're going to have to try to pull everybody out, and then we're going to have to put them through a healing process, and then we're going to get somewhere, and hopefully everyone will make it. And maybe everybody isn't going to make it, but all we can do is the best that we can, and that's why it's called the rescue mission, right, Anna?
Well, how, going kind of back to one of our original topics, there is, you take somebody that's been their whole life worried about money, worried about putting food on the table, probably doing a job they despise. Honestly, I would say the vast majority of people, at least in this country, are doing a job they totally despise. They're not doing something they enjoy. They probably don't feel fulfilled. They're doing it so they can get food on the table. They can get money and put food on the table. When you remove that, just think of that psychological burden. If you were to remove that from let's say a 60-year-old man or woman, it doesn't matter. Just any
Anyone
living
who's in
man
a
or woman.
position. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyone
just
who's in that position.
just remove that from them. They're going to be lost. They're going to be lost because that's all they've known is to worry about that. And if you tell them you could tomorrow and for the next week and for the next month and for the next year, you can go do whatever you want, whatever you want. That's a huge psychological burden. That's that Stockholm syndrome or whatever. They're going to miss that boundary of what they've been used to, and they're going to peek outside the cage and say, I don't know, it looks pretty scary out there. That's a tough thing. That's
when you have to go when you're trembling, right,
that's
Greg?
the root that's the root of what we're dealing with here, I think.
You have to come out trembling, and it's going to be fine, because God only whispers through you once.
Yeah.
And when he does, you have to receive it. Are you willing to receive it? Most people aren't able and willing to receive it.
What I'm gunning for is the total abolition of the Internal Revenue Services, both of them.
Right.
Gone.
And
that's really not negotiable, because they're both engaged in illegal racketeering.
Yep.
Okay. So now imagine all of the people who've spent all their lives, not just in this country, because when we take it out in this country, it's going to go in Canada and Australia and all sorts of other countries that have suffered under the same illegal racketeering regime. When we take out the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service here, it's going to go worldwide. Okay. So we take it out, and all these people who throughout all of their lives have been in fear and trembling of April 15th, and who have been, afraid of IRS thugs breaking down their doors and seizing their records and throwing them in jail and taking their homes and their businesses and property. Suddenly, it's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. And the corporations that were responsible for promoting these racketeers are being held feet first to the fire for it. Suddenly, the hunted have become the hunters. Okay. Now, what effect is that going to have? Will people be, kind of stunned and disbelieving? Will the explanation that it was always illegal and unlawful make sense to them? Will they be able to uh, really trust their newfound freedom from the racketeers?
I'd say they're going to be like the chickens. As soon as you open the door, they're going to be like, oh, and they're going to be terrified and run back in the garage. And then you're going to be like, come on. And you have to walk them out. You know, they're going to be shocked and awed, and they're going to need all of us to be like, it's okay.
It's the stages of grief, isn't it? I mean, you
It
described
is.
this on a call a while back. It's that stage. The first thing they're going to be is like, nope, can't be. Nope,
Yep.
I don't believe it.
Denial, denial,
Yeah,
denial.
they'll knock you down, Anna, and all of us. Nope, can't be. You're wrong. That'll be the first one, you know, and then they're going to get
They'll be
really, really
running to give them the money. I know they'll be running. Wait, I got to give them the money. Wait.
mad. Yeah, but you know, hopefully, I mean, we all kind of, that's just a natural tendency to go through that. I think you're right, though, Niti, is we're just going to have to, that's why what we are doing, more and more people, you know, doing this is going to be better, because then we're going to be able to help those, you know, and help them go through those stages, you know, because they're going to go through them. Hopefully we can get them through them really quick.
Well, you know.
Well, it can't be a quantum leap, Anna. Will it be able to be one, you think?
Well, I certainly think that getting rid of the IRS is a fairly simple, straightforward business. You know, they're engaged in private racketeering under color of law. They've never had any kind of legal right to be operating as they have. They've been operating as privateers or racketeers, however you want to describe it, throughout their entire existence. And, you know, getting rid of them is just what's required by law and custom. And, you know, it should be a no-brainer that, yes, they are gone. They've been stripped of any you know, ability to operate in this country. And so
I wouldn't want to be an IRS auditor when those people hit the anger phase.
right.
That's,
Well,
you know, and we don't want that. We don't want that,
No.
but that's a scary side of it, is stuff like that, because people will be angry and they will want retribution.
well,
Well,
you can't
I
blame
mean, I don't blame them. No, I don't blame them. But yeah, that's going to be the reality of it, though.
mm-hmm.
Well, and I'm sorry, but when you've allowed foreign racketeers to come in here and harass the people of this country on completely specious and artificially constructed arguments that have been promoted, then there really isn't any excuse.
Nope.
It may not have been this generation of bureaucrats responsible for the existence of the machine, but having been fully advised of the nature of it, it is the responsibility of the bureaucrats to bring an end to the criminal activity and to protect the people that they are supposed to protect.
Yep.
And so, you know, our job is to take out the skewers and go. So we're getting rid of the IRS, and they're going to try to argue that they should be able to keep the IRS to use against their own employees, and to continue to inflict the IRS as a payroll tax on their own employees. And our argument is going to be that we outlawed it in the entirety of the country, and that they have no basis to operate on our land and soil, period, at all. And that their corporations are under demand to pay back every penny that they illicitly purloined under color of law. And, you know, that's just going to make them squeal harder, because they're going to think, oh, but we can't afford to give up the income from our collection of internal revenue tax from our employees. Well, guys, you're just going to have to obey the law.
Yeah.
I know it's a big concept for you, but if it's illegal to collect on our land and soil, it's illegal to collect on our land and soil. And if it's unlawful to collect on our land and soil, it's unlawful to collect on our land and soil. And you have no right or reason or ability to come in here and tell us that you are going to collect from your employees while your employees are standing here on our soil.
Right.
That's right, Anna. You get them.
Well, that's what they were supposed to do, or that's what they said they were doing to begin with. And
That's
then
what
they
they
went
said.
way beyond. So we've trusted you once.
Right.
I mean, income tax. What did he say?
Uh,
External
Excise tax.
external tax. I mean, we don't need you to have an instrument that you can just rename 10 different ways. So no, thank you. How about that?
right.
So no, thank you.
End of the Internal Revenue Service.
Right. All the
I love
revenues,
it.
all of your revenue services. How about that?
All right.
I
Well,
love
and they really deserve it. I think
Yes.
the thing that will be shocking to people is realizing that this has been going on since the 1100s.
Wow.
Yeah. Right.
And
When
it's
there's so many of these things, like this is every day there's more blockbuster, thing that you can learn, friends, because welcome to our YouTube channel. If you have our first, like brand new coming here, there's we're blowing everybody's minds. They're like, who are these people? What are they talking about? So
no. This is going to blow your mind. If you really want to know something that blow your mind, the Internal Revenue Tax was imposed by the Roman Catholic Church in France beginning in 1135 as a once a year tax on income that was collected on April 15th by members of the Dominican order, aka the Inquisition.
Mhm.
And it's basically the same today. Nothing has changed. And the church used this to fund the Crusades.
Hmm.
So this is the church's war chest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is something that started centuries ago as a private donation that was collected once a year on April 15th by what? The Inquisition. Well, guess what? It's still collected by the
I was
Inquisition.
going to say it's no different.
No, literally. It's collected out of Puerto Rico where they still have access to and use the Spanish law of the Inquisition.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I
why
mean,
that
but
this completely foreign thing has been foisted off onto Americans for generations now, and they've been taking a third of our income or more ever since the Second World War.
Mhm.
So, you can't imagine how much they owe us. You can't even begin to imagine how much they owe us.
Mm-mm.
It's an insurmountable debt, and it's
Yeah.
owed in an insurmountable debt platform, that of silver.
That's
They're
right.
supposed to be paying this back in silver, and there
There,
literally isn't enough silver on the planet for them to ever be able to pay us back. So they are eternally bankrupt. And that's what they intended to do to us. They intended to set up a system where we would be eternally bankrupt. But instead,
we tried to warn you, Anna. They're coming for you because we're way over time, and we're trying to do a good job. But then we're not going to just leave because we're going to hear everything that you have to share with us. We love you so much. But friends, look, we're going to continue this. We're going to see you next Tuesday, and thank you so much for joining us. And this was a lot of fun.
and if you want us to get rid of the IRS and have the wherewithal to do these things, help.
Yep. There you
Yes.
go.
So
Go
listen, that's another point I want to make clear. It's not like we're just helping Anna and the Federation and the living law firm right now. Even after the banks are open It is the American tradition for us to fund the Federation.
Oh, yeah.
It is the work of the people to fund the Federation. So this isn't something that's just for right now. This is the way the tradition works here on America. The Federation is funded by the people to serve the people. They are all volunteers, just like everyone on our state assemblies. We're all volunteers. There is no mandatory requirement for us to, or no obligatory whatever. We're not obliged to serve our nation. This is something that we have to choose to do, we have to want to do, and then we all work together and we support each other. So Anna, thank you so much for the great work that you guys do. And everyone, there are instructions here throughout the entire show, every episode. You can watch any of the old episodes, pause it, do whatever you got to do to get the address, get the Cash App, get the what's that thing called, Revolut, for international instant payments. And let's support our Federation.
You want the IRS gone? Support it. You want all the wars for profit gone? Support it. You want America to be safe and free again instead of living in fear and working for plastic pieces of corn?
Right.
Support it.
It's not that our states need to be seated. The Federation has the ability to do this right now.
Right.
It has nothing to do with that. And it's not our jurisdiction. It's the Federation's jurisdiction. And we're supposed to be doing our job on the state level, and they do their job.
Yeah, and there's a big misunderstanding here.
Yes.
All of the states are in General Assembly, and they are all in session. They are seated. This idea that just because you're not able to provide all the services that states are supposed to provide, that you're somehow invalidated or that you're waiting for something, that's stupid. It's not true. You're already in session. You already have your general assemblies. You're already beginning the process of electing your officers, setting up your committees. You're gathering your forces, beginning, all of you are in some stage of development of your jury pool. You're already considering international business. You've already voted on a public law, for the first public law in 100 years. You've already taken care of the business of enrolling the Western states as full states of the Union. Wake up, folks. There's no waiting. We're not sitting around, with some sort of magic wand that, that you're somehow prevented from taking action.
Anchors away, Anna. Anchors away.
Right.
If you guys have not read her article, Anchors Away, please do, because this is a confusion on an everyday level. We don't have to race to do anything except to get the veil off.
Get the mindset, yes.
We got to get the veil off, and we have to learn how to love each other and focus on this mission. This isn't about who's in charge and bossing each other around. This is about loving each other so much that we're going to help each other while we're sick, while we're broken, while we're weary, while we're demented. We're going to save everyone, because there are plenty of demented people out there.
Unfortunately true. There are people who are so damaged that they cannot conceive of just working together with their neighbors in their mutual benefit.
Right. But we're going to love them anyway, and we're going to drag them out because they've been poisoned, you guys. They've been poisoned, and they're being poisoned constantly. So we have to save them. Isn't that what you do? Like if you were serving in the military and there was a war and it was gassed everywhere and your guys are all messed up because of it, you'd pull them out. No man left behind. No man left behind, guys.
Right. So even though we have lots of people that are very confused, and people that insult and slander us every day, and people who make gossip and who, run wild with paranoia, even though we have all these different people causing all these different problems, we just rise above it.
We just maintain the peace, and we love each other so hard and pull them out. Just pull them out.
Right. Every American is precious, every single one. And they all have a common birthright. They all have all the birthrights that everybody else has. And so we do not give up on anybody and we do not harm anyone. You know,
Yeah.
our, our, some of our assemblies are just hotbeds of suspicions and paranoia and gossip and stupidity. But it's
All
up
the
to
side
us.
effects.
It's up to us. It's our assembly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each individual has to take responsibility for what goes on in their assembly. It's up to you as assembly members to say, hey, we don't do gossip. We don't do unsupportable, uh, suppositions. This is not what we're here to do. We're here to do work. We're here to restore our government. We're not here for a bunch of petty personality disputes. In fact, we're not here for the purposes of dispute at all. We're here to organize our government and assert the proper role of our government. We're the employers, and we're here to tell our employees what to do. We're the contract holders, and we're here to enforce the constitutional contracts. Okay? This is business. This is serious damn business. We're here to run our country one state at a time. And, people who think that this is about their petty problems with the de facto court, or that this is about taxes that are being alleged by foreign corporations, or who think that this is about, any kind of title that can be conveyed by the British Crown, they need to have their heads examined and they need to go sit down in a corner until they figure out that, oh, gee, I'm back in America. Who knew?
They're not
Okay.
thinking big enough. They're just simply not thinking big enough when they get caught up on those little things.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're not thinking big enough, but they need to be encouraged to.
Yep.
Right.
I
And
agree.
and just focus on the mission. Even if you are not capable of thinking bigger, just we're supposed to operate in love. Anna, the funniest comments these people make are, "Hey, we're not kumbaya, we're the government." Um, really? What do you have to say about that, Anna?
I say that the government of this country is vested in its people, just as average, everyday living people who, go home every day and eat dinner and watch TV.
Yep.
And I say that there's no freaking way that any other externalized institution has anything to say about it. If we say that they don't have the authority, they don't have the authority. If they don't honor their contracts with us, they don't have a contract. Okay? This bullshit is about to, come to a screeching halt. Okay? The IRS, bunch of racketeers that have no right to be here. So they're going. Bye. And our subcontractors can make all the arguments about their prerogatives as employers all they want. But if it's taking place on our land and soil, it's our call, not theirs. So, they came ashore in 1925 and incorporated the Internal Revenue Service in the state of Delaware, the British territorial state of Delaware, and they began to deploy their forces to collect from their own employees a kickback tax, a payroll kickback tax, which is patently illegal to begin with. Okay, it's illegal for them to be collecting a payroll kickback tax. Period. Okay, so they were engaged in illegal acts against their own employees at the time they imported the Internal Revenue Service to our shores. And they were supposed to remain within district boundaries, but they very quickly found their ways and means and excuses to begin misaddressing Americans as if those Americans were federal employees and dependents. And therein lies the rub. They all need to be taken out behind the woodshed and given a good horsewhipping. Okay, the people who were responsible for this were criminals then, and they are still criminals now if they supported or are complicit with it in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Trump sent 45,000 IRS agents home. He's still got 42,000 to get rid of. that Joe Biden hired. And then he needs to dissolve both the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service. They both need to go, 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 and never come back. Okay? So this is very simple. The IRS was charging you a third of your income every year as a means to rig the fiat money system.
Yep.
Okay? And that fiat money system never benefited you at all. That fiat money system stole from you. It stole blind. Okay? It just grabbed everything. You've been exchanging your goods and your services for worthless paper. Literally worthless. Right there in court cases all over the freaking place. Federal Reserve notes have no value. You cannot be accused of a crime if you steal them. Right in court cases, and we've given you the court citations. Okay, people, it's time to wake up, and it's time to demand better. It's time to get rid of the IRS entirely from these shores and to stop them from misaddressing Americans and to put an end to this entire horror show. These people are our employees and we are their employers, and therefore we are doing our job telling them what they can get away with and what they can't. Okay? And this is the whole focus. This is what we're here to do. And so if you want to be free of the IRS and the Internal Revenue Service and a bunch of phony military, quasi-military bullshit, which isn't military, is mercenary as hell, okay? If you want to get rid of all of this crime and graft and corruption and want to live your life in peace and have your constitutions honored, then it's time to get behind this movement and help us with all the force, all the thought, all the energy, all the prayers, and all the money that you can send, because this is where we are at. We are at the crux of the matter to get this job done. And we're never going to have a better chance than right now. Trump is in office. The military is behind him. The military needs to know what's gone on. And that will be the end of it. Because when the military gets a good gap and realizes that they've been used as cheap mercenaries and that they've been repeatedly cheated out of the quote-unquote share of the profit that they were promised, and that this whole thing is just nothing but a whole bunch of hokey-dokey commercial bullshit and profiteering, well, then this is going to roll, folks. It's going to roll hard. It's going to roll big. And we're not going to have to put up with any of this bullshit anymore. Okay, so get on board, get moving, get your head wrapped around it, and join your assemblies. Get together. Get the thing together. As my mother used to say, get your poop in a group.
There you go.
Okay, absolutely. So Canada wants to know, is the IRS connected to Canada? I mean, aren't we in a one world global system?
Yeah.
This is what Anna keeps saying, is it's a one world government. Don't we all get it?
The CRA is the same thing. What do you call it? It's a social insurance system in Canada. You have a SIN number instead of an SSN number, okay? It's the identical same system. They have created these birth performance bonds, okay? They have issued these certificates of ownership interest in each and every one of you, treated you like cattle. They have human trafficked you into a foreign jurisdiction. And they've fingered you to pay their taxes. So yes, it's time. It's worldwide. It's time that we just said no more IRS, no CRA, all this stuff that you owe us, and your principals owe us.
Globally, just everybody who's paying attention. Hello, everywhere. It's already a one world system. Hello, under the Pope and the King. Who's not comprehending this yet? 81 episodes. 80. What number are we on? 84. We're all
84.
number 84. 84. If you listen to the first episode and the 11th episode and the 22nd episode and the 33rd, we keep saying the same thing.
You know what's so frustrating also for me as fiduciary
Mm,
is that you learn the truth.
right.
And when you learn the truth, you're often stuck at odds with other people who need to know the truth because they've been the victims of misinformation and they've been the victims of propaganda.
Yeah.
And so, you know, here today we discussed Muammar Gaddafi's vision for an African Union and the use of gold-backed money and why he was murdered.
Yeah.
Murdered for no reason other than that.
Yeah.
And our troops, our sons and daughters, were misled totally about the issues or why they were attacking Libya. They had no idea. They trusted their quote unquote government. And they went and they killed people wholesale and they destroyed infrastructure and they did all of these horrible things to Libya. And they murdered Gaddafi in a horrible, illegal, nasty way. And they slandered his memory and slandered everything that he'd done. And all he'd done, his crime, was to help his own country and his own people and try to help Africa up out of the enslavement that these colonialists from Europe had dumped on Africa. That was his crime. Okay, that's why they invaded Libya. That's why they murdered Gaddafi. And, you know, the people of Libya loved Gaddafi because he brought them water. He brought them food. He brought them roads. He brought them schools. He brought them hospitals. He brought them a standard of living and human decency. And we killed him. And we destroyed a great deal of that infrastructure. And we didn't replace it with anything. And we thought we did a great thing. Because, of course, the propaganda machine that we trusted was going 24/7. Yap, 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 and not telling a single truth.
Yeah.
Okay? So we have to deal with it. We have to put an end to the propaganda machine. We have to put an end to the military being misled and controlled by foreign politicians. We have to invoke that little part of the oath that says, all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Hello, U.S. military, wah, wah, wah. You have domestic enemies that you're not controlling. They're masquerading as members of the United States Congress. Okay? You have foreign enemies that are also up your butts. But the ones that you really have to worry about in this scenario are the ones that are hidden in plain view. The ones that you have to take care of and neutralize are the domestic, with respect to you, enemies. Take care of that and we'll be 90% of the way home.
Yep.
Yeah. We really need to get the message into the military because, I mean, it seems like what do you call him? He comprehends because they're that's what they're doing on Africa, right? Like he's comprehending it. So how do we get that message to our guys? You know, that's what we got to figure out.
Oh, we have to talk to them. They're our sons and daughters.
Hey, I'm trying to talk to all the ones that we know, and it's like you can see their eyes just glazing over while you're talking to them.
Well, yeah, well, they're deeply indoctrinated.
Right.
And, you know, me saying a word in defense of Muammar Gaddafi, they would look at me like Hanoi Jane.
Sure.
You know?
You tell them Colin Powell was knighted and he's, you know, bending the knee to the queen, and they glaze over, and you're just like,
look it up.
Let's catch up, guys. Let's just catch up. I mean,
you know,
Ronald Reagan.
Right. Ronald Reagan was knighted by the Queen. That means he was Sir Ronald and he was her lackey.
Why would he bend the knee to the Queen, friends? Why our military guys should get that if nobody else gets it? The guys who are in service should know.
Remember Stormin' Norman? Schwarzkopf bent his knee to the Queen.
Yep.
Henry Kissinger bent his knee to the Queen.
Yeah.
They pledged their selves, their lives, their honor, their everything to the Queen. So are they our guys? Hell no. Are not, never were.
Right.
You know?
Like Greg says all the time, Anna. He's like, so what? They don't want to believe law? So you don't want to see with your eyes that if a guy is bending the knee to the Queen, that he means that's, he's working for them? Like, you don't get it?
Yep.
Well, it's the same thing with allodial title. Everybody now everybody's slapped out about allodial title. Allodial title. Well,
I need an allodial title. I need it for my land patent. I know. It's
no. A title is a title is a title is a title. If you hear the word title or district, it means it's foreign and it means it's British. Right. Or it's Roman municipal. But it has nothing to do with America or American land.
Right.
Okay? So you do not need an allodial title. What you need to do is track down the land patent and the grant underlying that land patent. But we know the grants.
Right.
Okay, so this is so stupid. They've got us all believing that we're somebody else.
Yeah.
They've got us all tracked into being good little Roman municipal citizens and British territorial citizens, as if we were born in goddamn Puerto Rico. Nothing against Puerto Ricans, but I'm not one. And I don't intend to live under the Spanish law of the Inquisition either. And I don't intend to live my life as a member of the British Commonwealth. Okay? I think it's very clear that I'm an American, a Wisconsinite, and I'm fed up. Okay? And there are a whole lot of other people here in this country who, once they wake up out of their stupid days and start looking at what's actually happened and what is happening around them, are going to be just as fed up and just as, determined to shove this right back down the filthy, lying throats that started spewing this however many years ago. In the issue of fraud has no statute of limitations. It doesn't matter if the fraud happened in 1701, 1642, 1805, 1865, or at any other time. A fraud is a fraud is a fraud is a fraud, and it is absolute justification to completely annihilate and held everything that happened as a result of the fraud null and void from the very beginning of the fraud. Okay, so we're going back to 1860. We could go back further.
Yeah.
We'll just have to follow it and see where it goes.
Yeah.
But we are definitely going back to 1860, and we are wiping clean the slate, which takes us through the entire business of the General Order 100 and all the executive orders misapplied on the assumption that this was a valid military occupation of this country by our employees.
Yep.
This is a message to Derek Johnson and all those other people who are absolutely, positively correct about everything they're saying, except that it's not military, it's not law of war, because it was all mercenary crap to begin with. Okay? And all those executive orders that are all based on Lincoln?
Go on.
More mercenary crap, having no kind of validity or authority outside the corporation. Okay? So it's just like today I get this premature notice that the WHO has been given all these sweeping powers. We don't have any contract with the WHO.
Right.
Zero. And we don't care what British Crown Corporation managers do. We still don't have a contract with the WHO. Okay? We don't care what those managers do, except that they have a contract with us and they'd better get busy and fulfill the contract or they will be held as non-performers and the whole thing will go up in smoke. There will be no contract for them to work on. They will have no power whatsoever. They won't be associated with us, but we will bankrupt the British Crown. We'll take that down. That little ship is going to go straight down to the bottom of the sea, just like the Spanish Armada, and stay there. Okay? So they have to move, and they have to move according to what we say. Okay? If we say no IRS, no Internal Revenue Service on our land, they have to move it, move it, move it. If we say our borders have to be secured and it's in the contract, they have to perform on that, on all our borders. Okay? No. We are the employers. They are the employees. This is just plain simple fact. And from now on, they get their marching orders. They have to comply. They have to perform. If it's in their contract, they have to perform on that. And if it's not in their contract, then it becomes their limitation. If they don't have a contract to impose taxes on Americans, they don't have a contract to probate our estates. These are things that, are obvious. Okay, look at the taxation process. Oh, damn. I've got to take this call, guys. We'll continue next week.
Next week, you guys.
Thank you.
So much.